also acknowledge the Kaurna people as the custodians of the Greater Adelaide region and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still as important as the living Kaurna here today. Yes, now, as this being a special meeting, there's a few apologies, and certainly for Mayor Karen and the CEO are at the Australian General Meeting in Canberra, and was -3 last night, so I'm not sure what's going to be like, but it's getting a bit that way down here in South Australia. Apologies tonight are Councillor Davies, and we have a bit more discussion as we go further into the meeting itself. And now tonight for Public Open Forum, we have Aldo Passon, who's going to come and speak with it. Sorry, Councillor Hughes.
Thanks, Brian. Leave of absence. I'd like to put a leave of absence for Councillor Little for the 19th of July to the 2nd of August, inclusive, please.
19th of July to the 2nd of August. Okay. Have somebody move that second by Councillor Shanks, a second by Councillor Vallelonga. All those in favour? Those against? Is carried. Thank you. Is there any other leave of absence at this stage, Councillor Shanks?
Could I please grant on behalf of Councillor Tooley leave from the 22nd of June to the 30th of July 2021, all inclusive?
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Vallelonga. All those in favour? Those against? It is carried. Thank you. Is there any other councillors for leave of absence? Now, a special welcome also tonight to the Bunya Press and Brendan over there on the corner to write all the good words about everybody, and to the staff members that are here tonight. It's always great to see the staff members here to answer any questions that anybody might have as the meeting goes on. So I think we'll now move straight on to the Public Open Forum, and we'll call on Mr. Aldo Passon from the Willaston Football Club. So welcome, Aldo, and we look forward to hearing what you've got to say.
All right, is that on? Screen. Yeah, it's on.
You're on. Sing us a song.
Yeah. Obviously, thank you, Deputy Mayor and all the councillors for the opportunity. So on behalf of the 3 footy clubs in Gawler, I would like to thank you the opportunity of allowing us to plead our case in regard to having a grant approval applicant to the unisex change rooms for all clubs. I'll start with, there's been no major infrastructure build for the past 45 years to all clubs. Since then, our growth has been quite large. We've had 10 extra teams. Obviously, the junior teams were governed by the primary school program, and we've doubled that up 10 years ago in regard to that. And obviously, women's football was a major one as well. That's put pressure on our internal building space due to that growth. And also what's added to it is the COVID issue that everyone has to deal with. Which we always have issues with, considering football is a winter sport and we'd like to be inside instead of outside. So we also have to manage that. Mentioning football, women's football is probably the fastest sporting growth in Australia, let alone the world. Us as a country, clubs have to deal with that, and we're embracing it. All 3 clubs have got women's teams and they're growing quite rapidly, and managing it is quite difficult because obviously we haven't had any major infrastructure builds, and we have to, in some cases, I know some clubs, they have to put a bed sheet. One side women are getting changed, and on the other side they're selling merchandise. and this is 2021. It's pretty terrible, I think. There is going to be an accident that's probably going to happen one day, and they're going to be pointing the finger of who's responsible, and then obviously volunteers will have to deal with it. The other thing that's probably hot on the list is I know for a fact from Wollaston Footy Club, we don't have any disabled toilets, and probably at least twice or 3 times a year, we have to turn back a disabled person to go to the toilet at the Wollaston Football Club on a Saturday. It makes our lives, again, volunteers, a bit embarrassing that we can't fulfil that. So we can tick a lot of boxes with this infrastructure build of unisex change rooms, of having a dual purpose with disabled as well as normal toilet facilities. We have probably over 2,000 participants with the 3 clubs that are actually going to be using these change rooms. It's not the spectators or family members. These are actually players and coaches. And you could probably double that because obviously you've got the reserves, as the opposition team as well. So it's a lot of people that we're using it. And one thing that we obviously have risk that's built into these costs is the build time frame. Now with these I believe they're probably transportable type modules. Earthworks will probably only take a week, level playing field, and then basic trenching. Within 1 month, that build will be completed in all 3 clubs. So the time frame is very quick as well. And more so, as a football community here in Gawler, I think both 3 clubs would have to be the best of embracing the town of Gawler with providing a platform or an entertainment area to keep kids off the streets, and more so that an economical benefit with, we provide back into our community, a town of Gawler community, we provide businesses when it comes to where we buy our alcohol through the local publicans. I know all 3 clubs use a South Gawler bakery to sell their pies and pasties, and a quite significant use of tradies in the actual Gawler community. We really strongly think that if you can embrace and encourage you to look at what we provide back to the town of Gawler community and support who supports your community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, councillors, have you got some questions, please, to Aldo there? Councillor Paul Little.
I think, Aldo, that you shortchange yourself because it might be the 3 Gawler clubs, but because you're in line with the Barossa Light and Gawler Football League, there's actually 9 clubs. So, yeah. And some of their amenities are far better than ours.
Oh, yes, yeah.
And I think that the town of Gawler has been remiss in certain areas, I believe, in change rooms and things for basically 2 out of the 3 clubs. Do you agree with that?
Oh, yeah, 100%. Yeah.
What do you envisage, like you said before about the growth? I think, being a few games myself, the growth is getting far in excess of what it was. So what would you envisage you'd need at Willaston for you to be up to speed with the SANFL and AFL in regard to women's football?
Oh, well, obviously we need the change rooms to be a massive tick. That will provide a separate change room block that can obviously fulfill, I'm assuming, both grades, both sides that are playing any one given time. So it's going to be quite a large area. And then you can add to that with storage and so forth. That's obviously where it makes it difficult. It's where you can't just put a shed there because it's just out in the open. It doesn't attract, it doesn't fit into the actual community, what you're trying to provide on the day. With this block, then you can provide other sheds around it, which are minor costs, and we can fulfill that, but it makes it a bigger picture for the community. So yeah, it's a massive thing for us to have a dual sex multi change rooms. It'd be awesome.
Thank you, Councillor Little, and Aldo for that. Any other councillors have any questions to talk to Aldo? And incredible when you were referring to the point that some 2,000 people will be using these facilities. I mean, there's no doubt about it. It's certainly a fast-growing sport, and we've got to be ready for it somehow or other, be able to put these things in place. No other councillors, any questions to Aldo? I'm sure he can be contacted at any
Yeah,
particular
anytime.
time.
Yep,
If
100%.
something
Yep.
that needs to be done. Thank you for coming,
guys.
Aldo. Appreciate it. Now, is there any other person that would like to speak to the council here tonight in this public open forum? You have 5 minutes if you wish to say anything. If not, we'll now move on to deputations. And the deputations here tonight, we have Mr. Jeff Barnes, CEO of Squash Australia, regarding item 11.1 and the Gawler Squash Club. So, Jeff, can you come forward? Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. Yes, I think you elevated me then. I think you said I was CEO of Squash Australia, but only CEO of Squash SA at this stage. I'll aspire to Squash Australia later on.
Right.
Look, although the Mayor is not here, I want to thank Mayor Redmond for and the Gawler Council for allowing a further deputation to speak tonight in support of retaining the functioning Gawler Squash Club in its current venue. I also want to thank Mayor Redmond for the opportunities we've had to discuss options regarding the solution of issues around the retention of the Gawler Squash Club as an operational community sporting club and a solution that can address the issues raised by the South Gawler Football Club. I also want to make the point that on a personal level, I'm particularly disappointed that the football club saw fit not to send any representatives to either of the two council convened meetings that we had at the administration centre. My disappointment is not only related to their non-attendance, but not having the chance then to clarify the number of disputed issues around the narrative regarding their desire to sequester the squash facility. Having said that, at the most recent meeting, we had some very good and positive conclusions in relation to those issues, and we hope that they might address the football club concerns and still be able to retain the Gawler Squash Club with its passionate community members. The issues that appear to be driving the football club's desire to sequester the squash facilities seem to be as follows. And again, because I haven't had a chance to speak to them, I'm working off of what some emails that have come through the squash club and what we've been told. There was a need for further change room facilities, and that was just mentioned. One of the squash courts can easily, and this was the dot points that we put together at the last council meeting. One of the squash courts can easily be used as a change room without damaging the floor by laying down removable rubber flooring that can be stored at the facility and reused whenever required. The squash club members are prepared to work with the football club to ensure the removable flooring is laid prior to game weekends and is taken up post to the completion of the games. The second issue was raised about the need for a warm-up room. Again, a squash court can be used as a warm-up area with no floor damage if the players wear court shoes or runners rather than the boots. This is common practice by many clubs that warm up in their runners, not their boots, when they're doing indoor warm-ups. Third was the need for a meeting room. Meeting rooms are just spaces, obviously, and at the moment there's 3 courts. If we can use the third court as a meeting room, that would satisfy that requirement. The weights are also in the squash facility upstairs. For me, it's quite a dangerous situation in terms of the amount of weights, and I know they've been moved around a number of times, but I note and we've talked with the council officials that there's quite a large amount of space behind the club rooms of South Gawler, and indeed there's a shed out the back there. I think you could easily put up another shed and establish that as the weights room rather than have it inside that facility. The fifth thing that was raised was the umpires' change rooms. And that space is currently used for umpires to change. And that's acceptable because I know in talking to the SNFL and having been involved in SNFL over the years, umpires do need a dedicated area for change rooms. But if so that area is quite appropriately used at this point in time. And if it needed to be expanded, there's room moving out towards the oval that could be used, and all the services are underground along there. Yes, it would be a capital cost, but that would provide increased facilities. We've received a number of emails, or at least the Gawler Squash Club has received a number of emails identifying these issues and saying that the Barossa Light and Gawler League and the SNFL have been putting pressure on the South Gawler Football Club to improve their facilities. I managed to speak to Rob Kerrin, who's the chair of the SNFL Commission, and Darren Chandler, the CEO. Both made the point that the SNFL is not looking to pressure the South Gawler Football Club to upgrade the facilities, especially not by taking over another sporting club venue. In fact, Darren specifically said that he was going to speak to his staff and ask why they hadn't engaged with the Barossa Light and Gawler League and support the league and the football club in applying for money to upgrade their facilities, especially in terms of change rooms for women, as we just talked about. That's a specific focus for the SNFL if people have followed their progress, and they have outlaid quite a significant amount of money in recent years. Lastly, in the short time I've had to explain our position, the issues around money has been raised at the football club. The squash club has indisputable records of significant amounts of money being paid to the football club, at least up to 2018. And we understand from our investigations beyond that, there are some uncashed checks. We're still trying to find out where they sit in the scheme of things, but the squash club paid a significant amount of money over that period up to 2018 at least. I'm not too sure that was in line with the lease, but the squash club did actually go ahead and pay that money. And further, there's been money coming into the system via casual bookings over that period. And I would have thought that that money would have been used perhaps for maintenance of the facility, because that was raised at our last meeting about the maintenance. I'm not sure, again, where that money ended up, but that would have been, from my point of view, an obvious use of money from casual players. Finally, in conclusion, there are solutions in our view that will address the football club's issues. And as people may be aware, I've spent most of my life in football, and so I can understand the issues and I understand the needs for football clubs to develop their facilities. But I think there are solutions to their issues that don't require one sporting community club to essentially facilitate the demise of another sporting club. And of course, the Gawler Squash Club and indeed Squash SA have made it quite clear and continue to make it clear that we're very happy to work with the South Gawler Football Club in addressing the issues and finding solutions to these, because we believe that's possible to find those solutions without taking the facility away and eventually, or essentially, making the Gawler Squash Club defunct. I'm happy to take any questions, but I guess my final comment would be that I don't think the general public would be appreciative of the fact that one community sporting club, as much as they have issues that they need to address, would want to resolve those issues by creating the demise of another community sporting club. I don't think that passes the pub test. I certainly don't think, and I know a number of members of the South Gawler Football Club have said publicly that they are doing this or taking these actions with remorse. But I think there are solutions, and so I don't believe we need to go down that track. I think we can find the solutions for the football club and still retain another community sporting organisation and facility. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Jeff. Is there any questions from elected members? Yes, Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. Just a question about the squash club at the moment. So, as I understand, they've been locked out of the facility. Is that true?
Yes, my understanding, and the squash club members are here, but my understanding is that the football club has continued with their approach of taking over the squash facility and has sort of sent letters out to ask for all the keys back and so on. And I believe that's occurred, and there's been some movement in terms of clearing out squash equipment, etc., out of the squash facility, which I'm not too sure would necessarily be in line with the current lease, but that's apparently occurred.
Councillor Hughes.
Thanks. I mean, it'd be pretty hard for the members to know, but have there been any changes made to those squash courts so it'd be hard to play squash again, or?
Yeah, look, I think the demise of the squash facility started when the football club put the carpet down in court. I think it's court 3, the third court anyway. Squash SA sees that a viable squash competition can be done with 3 courts, which the squash club had, obviously. Once you reduce that to 2, then it becomes very difficult to continue with a viable competition in terms of pennant teams and so on. So I think it probably started back in those days when the carpet was put down, and obviously the squash court was then not viable for squash. And I think for the councillors that came down when we had the information day the other day, they would have seen that there was some damage to one of the walls of one of the squash courts as well. So there has been some work done inside the squash facility that has hampered the possibility of playing squash in those courts.
Thank you. Thanks. Yes, Councillor Little.
Jeff's a long while. I used to umpire in footy in the old days. You wouldn't remember me, must be told me off a few times. Jeff, do you realise that if the squash had adhered to the lease the last 4 years, this might not have reached this stage? And under the, what I believe when I've read the lease agreement is that you're a subsidiary of the lease, and by the squash courts not adhering to that lease, they breached their faith of their contract, and you haven't paid fees for, I think you said 4 years or something. And so I think that might be an issue.
Yeah, I'm sure that is, and I don't think the squash club would say it either. That there's not some level of blame with the squash club, sort of, I guess, not being as resilient as they should have been. My understanding from what the squash club has told me is that they have paid fees right up to and including 2018, and that they have sent cheques since then that haven't been cashed, and we've been investigating how that might have occurred. And also there has been the casual users that have used the squash facilities right through until now, I guess, and that money's been paid for the use of those facilities, and I'm assuming that that money could have been paid as well for the upkeep and the maintenance of the squash courts or the squash facility. I'm not too sure the lease actually asks for any rent from from my reading anyway, any rent from the squash club. And I understand from our discussions last council meeting that the football club would have preferred if the squash club had become members of the football club, I guess, in a similar way that the netball and the tennis people have done. And yeah, I guess that might have been a discussion point that they could have had a number of years ago and resolved it at that point in time. But I don't think that negates the fact that there's well, if you replace the three squash courts in today's construction, it's probably a $300,000 facility. I don't think it, particularly seeing, I believe there are solutions to the problems that that quite rightly the football club has raised without causing the demise of the squash club. So I think, and again, I reiterate, Mayor Edmund invited through the CEO, Gawler Squash SA and the football club on 2 occasions to sit down and see if there was a way where we could get to find a win-win situation and find those solutions. Unfortunately, the football club declined to attend either of those meetings. So we haven't had, well, I haven't been in a situation where we've been able to sit down and actually thrash out how we might resolve their issues and still keep the squash club.
Thank you, Jeff. And councillors, if there be no other questions, as you can see in our 68-page agenda tonight, we have item 11.1 in officers' reports, and that will be discussed further. So thanks for your time to come in tonight, Jeff. And
thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Hope things
Thank
will
you.
work out. Thank you. Now it's a great pleasure to introduce Ms. Paige Carter. You might have all read the very interesting email today that was sent around, and a very enthusiastic lady, and we're looking forward to hearing from you to do with playground structure and that. So thank you, Paige, and welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to present to you tonight. My name is Paige Carter, and I live in Gawler South with my husband Sam, daughter Lacey, and son Oakland. Oakland is the reason I am here tonight. He is nearly 3 and has a severe autism diagnosis. For those of you who may not know what autism is, I'll explain it quickly for you. Autism spectrum disorder, or ASD, is a complex developmental condition that involves persistent challenges in social interaction, speech and nonverbal communication, restrictive and repetitive behaviours. The effects of ASD and the severity of symptoms are different in each person. My little boy is on the severe end of the spectrum. So most of these difficulties mentioned affect him. I've also worked in the disability sector right here in Gawler for nearly 10 years. And during that time, I've been an advocate for all that I've worked with. So when my own son was diagnosed in October last year, my passion for advocating for people, and in particular children with disabilities, soared. During the process of not just working in the field, but actually becoming a special needs family myself, I became aware of how isolating it is to have a child with special needs. So I decided to make an Instagram and Facebook page called Oak for Autism to try and form a community of families going through the same thing as me within our community. This has been an incredible platform, and just last Saturday, I hosted a retreat for mums who have children with special needs, alongside local yoga instructor Rachel Ellen from Temple of the Moon, which was a huge success. I've also communicated with lots of Gawler locals about our need for more inclusive play spaces, which you'll see in the coming slides. Oh, now I've lost that thing. The importance of inclusion within all communities is paramount to families like mine. Outings can be extremely difficult due to our children's struggles, behaviours and anxieties. So having somewhere to go that is purpose-built for children like my son can make all the difference. The word inclusion has a much more powerful meaning than most realise. Inclusion by dictionary meaning is the practice or policy of providing equal access to opportunities and resources for people who might otherwise be excluded or marginalised, such as those who have physical or mental disabilities and members of other minority groups. So how can we provide this in Gawler, you might ask? Myself and so many other families would love to see spaces with inclusive equipment in our community. For example, more fenced playgrounds, because many children with disability abscond and have no sense of danger, making it very hard for parents to keep up with them, especially if we have other children as well. Sensory-focused equipment, for example, musical equipment, water play, nature play, and spinning equipment. Inclusive swings with 5-point harnesses and Liberty swings, more shaded areas, and last but not least, communication boards placed in each playground. A communication board is featured on the screen. I'm going to read you this clinical example of what a communication board is, which was written by my son's speech pathologist, Kira Stone, who is right here in Gawler. Aided communication boards are a tool which specifically are conducive to providing aided language input for people with communication disabilities, specifically in a playground environment. The boards are consisting of core vocabulary, high frequently used words that are functional and can be used across many different objects, actions, situations. For example, turn, put, have, go, stop. Fringe vocabulary, more specific words, generally nouns that are specific to the setting or environment. For example, swing, slide, ball. Social communication, vocabulary to support social interactions. For example, my turn, fun, great, bad, enough. By putting these boards in our playgrounds, children like my little boy will recognise them as they use these communication systems daily to communicate at home. It will give them a voice when out in the community. Our voice is something most of us take for granted. I want you to picture how it feels to be in a foreign country where you can't speak their language or communicate your needs to those around you. No one understands you. Well, this is what it's like for our children every day. I would love so much to give them a voice within our community. I would like to leave you with not only my opinion, but the opinion of many families living right here in Gawler. These comments are from a recent Facebook post I put up on my page. Thank you so much for listening to me. It is an honour to present to you all and share my story. Thank you.
Thank you, Paige. Is there any questions, please, councillors? Councillor Shaggs.
Firstly, thank you, Paige. That was fantastic. Would you say on weekends or weekdays you choose where to go based on the play equipment that works in with your family? And I see you nodding. Would you say that that play equipment is in Gawler or neighbouring suburbs?
Neighbouring suburbs. There's only one playground here in Gawler that we can go to, and that is the Apex playground on Gillian Terrace. And that is purely because of the equipment, and it's fenced. Otherwise, we go to surrounding suburbs. Fremont Park is fantastic. The playgrounds in Blake's Crossing are fantastic. But a lot of the playgrounds here in Gawler, we just can't take him to because they're safety risks.
Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Vallola.
This is a question to Sam.
Of course.
Is this doable, Sam? Some of these things?
Sorry, did you understand your question?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Through the mayor, certainly anything's possible. It's about allocating funding accordingly, but there's obviously a number of items that have been identified. It's how they're then retrofitted into the existing spaces or potentially then included into future projects. So I think there's no limitation on being able to include them other than funding and priority.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Hughes.
Just a question on the communication boards.
Yep.
I'm lucky enough to have 2 or 3 daughters studying different courses, and one's speech and the other one's occupational therapy. Has your speech pathologist explained the extra benefits that the communication board will sort of give and actually, should actually speed up some of the learnings? So, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. So like I sort of briefly touched on, my son uses a board just like what I showed you, but at home, obviously on a smaller scale. For him to be able to go up to something that he recognises and point to that picture because he knows what that picture means, will only encourage him to use that communication system more and more and give him more confidence to be able to communicate. So it will help him in so many different ways, and so many other children as well, because they recognise that form of communication. That is their form of communication.
So in my understanding is that it then allows them to communicate with other kids. Yeah. And that just speeds up that process, that confidence, and means that they learn through playing and just really have a humongous, good learning.
Exactly. And that's where it comes back to inclusion as well, because Oakland, just speaking for myself and for Oakland, he already really struggles to play with other children. That's a real big struggle for him due to lots of different things: aggressive behaviours, lack of communication, development delay, and he's not included because of all of those things. So if he could communicate, that could open up opportunities for him to be included. And that's why there's pictures on these things as well, because he isn't the only one that knows what that picture means. Our children are taught, and shown what those pictures mean. It also opens up for other children to be more accepting of children with disabilities, of diversity. Like, diversity is so important, and some kids are sheltered from it, but if we put it out there, then they see it and they will be more understanding of it as they grow up, and more accepting of it as they grow up as well.
Thank you, Paige.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Is there any other councillors who have a question? And Mr. Sam Delina over here, he's got a huge department, but at the moment they're doing up a couple of playgrounds around the town, and I'm sure your good words and what you passed on here tonight will certainly go in the right direction. So thank you for your time. Right, now we move on to a declaration of interest and adjourning items, and I've sort of fitted it in there. We have Councillor Nathan you would like to speak at the present moment to do with an email and a follow-on support to a fellow councillor. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've just been asked to deliver a statement on behalf of Councillor Tooley. So I'm just going to read the words that have been put in front of me, and yeah. So Councillor Tooley has sent this through, and I'll begin now. I provide this apology statement at the suggestion of the Ombudsman. After the January 2021 council meeting, the Ombudsman received an anonymous complaint stating that I failed to declare a conflict of interest regarding the Code of Conduct complaint reports at items 11.2, 11.3 and 11.4. I didn't think I had a conflict of interest for these items, and my view was reinforced when neither Mayor Redman nor CEO Nat intervened to express any opinion that in their view I did. Mayor Redman and CEO Nat have intervened on many occasions to advise members that they have conflicts of interest with items on council meeting agendas. When I have challenged this practice, Mayor Redman and CEO Nat have responded in emails to all members stating that it is their responsibility to advise members when potential conflicts arise, and that they will continue to do so. In fact, as recent as only 2 meetings prior to this January 2021 meeting and at the November 2020 council meeting, Mayor Redman interrupted me and declared that I must declare an interest in the matter related to the Councillor Tooley investigation item, and that I must leave the chamber. When I challenged that view, declared a perceived conflict and refused to leave the meeting, Mayor Redman shut the meeting down. So given the fact that Mayor Redman and CEO Nat have taken responsibility for advising members when they have a potential conflict, and because it was clear to Mayor Redman and CEO Nat that I had a connection to items 11.2, 11.3 and 11.4, and because they did not intervene nor advise me of any potential conflict, this reinforced my view that I did not have a conflict in these items. Given the practice by certain members of using points of orders and gag motions to bully, discriminate and stifle debate, I have deliberately chosen to move each of these 3 items as I wanted to guarantee my opportunity to speak to each of them. I wanted to be able to speak uninterrupted and explain that I only submitted the Code of Conduct complaints at items 11.2, 11.3 and 11.4 as a last result, and on the advice of the Mayor and CEO. And only after all my attempts to settle the grievances through dialogue and mediation with Councillor Hughes and Mayor Redman had failed, Mayor Redman and Councillor Hughes refused to even respond to emails or even discuss my grievances with them.
That's not true. That's not true.
I've given permission to Councillor Shank to read out a letter, so I'd like him to continue, and if there is discussion afterwards, I'll accept it.
It's actually not correct. Actually, it's not correct.
Continue, Councillor Shank.
Having submitted the formal complaints on advice from Mayor Redman and CEO Nat, that this was my only hope for resolution, I still hope for resolution by mediation. And I had stated emphatically that I regretted having to resort to a formal complaint and that I did not want money wasted on outsourcing my complaints to blood-sucking lawyers.
That's not what happened.
Despite my pleas, it was Mayor Redman and CEO Nat, not me, who chose to outsource these complaints to the blood-sucking lawyers at great cost. Even though these 3 Code of Conduct complaints were submitted separately and submitted many, many months apart, the 3 reports were saved up and placed collectively onto the January 2021 council meeting agenda for maximum effect. Outsourcing Code of Conduct complaints to lawyers is hugely expensive, has never led to healing or resolution, causes greater animosity between members, and has proven to be nothing more than a costly point scoring exercise. And this chamber is fully aware I strongly advocate for and believe in the proven best practice of mediation, consultation and dialogue as the best means.
Your point of order, sir?
Is that, could you put the mic?
Councillor Nathan, push yours off yet.
Thank you. The point of order is the fact is that I actually tried to mediate with Councillor Tooley, and Councillor Tooley's response was that I actually had to apologise first and admit that I was wrong to everyone and everywhere first. And that's not a way to actually open mediation. That's actually not mediation. That was his attempt of mediation. And his previous code of contact before that was immediately putting the complaint in without actually giving me a chance to actually mediate the time before that. So his two attempts of mediation with me have never actually gone. It's just not correct in the statement that's being made tonight, and I just don't think it's appropriate to continue.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes, but I would like the letter to be read to the end of it, please. Thank you, Nathan. Would you, Councillor Shank, would you continue? Is it very much longer?
No, I think I have about 4 more sentences. Sorry, my call for mandatory grievance procedure as the first step in complaints handling procedure has fallen on deaf ears. The Ombudsman is of the view that I probably should have declared a conflict of interest at items 11.2, 11.3 and 11.4 at the January 2021 Ordinary Council meeting, and suggests that I can correct the matter by issuing an apology to the Chamber. Taking that advice from the Ombudsman, I accept on reflection that it would have been prudent of me to have declared a perceived conflicts at items 11.2, 11.3 and 11.4 at the January 2021 meeting, and to have them remained in the Chamber to participate in the debate. I unreservedly apologise to the Chamber for my poor judgment and for failing to declare the conflict as described. Councillor Tooley.
Thank you, Councillor Shanks. I see your hand, Councillor Kosh, and but at this particular point, I'd just like to ask of you, councillors, you heard in that statement that it was made that it was a public apology to this chamber. Have we any comments at this particular point in time? Councillor Kosh?
Yeah, this is a question to the acting CEO.
Mr. Ryan.
Mr. Ryan, what's the process that we need to follow? And I've never had this happen before, that somebody else would read basically apology statement to the chamber. So how do we get advice whether this wasn't actually an appropriate apology and that we should accept it? From my understanding, an apology is one that is unreserved and it gets to the point. It doesn't ramble around. It just and it's focused and direct. It's not a rambly statement like we just heard, and also that it is not defamatory or rude, etc. Because some of those comments there I felt may actually breach the code of conduct. So I'm just wanting to know from the acting CEO, what's the process that we go through to actually get some advice whether that was actually a proper apology that we can actually accept and actually put into the minutes.
Thank you, Councillor Kosh, but to Mr. Viney, I'm just wondering whether we may ask Kate Leeton, who is the governance officer, if you would like to make a comment on that particular matter that Councillor Kosh has mentioned.
Council doesn't have any communication received from the Ombudsman in this regard. So we have to take the request from Councillor Tooley to present apology. It is up to the chamber whether or not they see that as an apology. There is no specific definition that is required. So it is really up to the chamber in how they wish to proceed.
Thank you, Kate. And Ryan, acting CEO, would you like to make any comment there at all?
Yeah, just to reiterate what Kate has said, it really the apology or the statement that was read out, it is what it is, and it's really now a matter for council how they wish to consider that statement that was read out.
Thank you, Mr. Viney. Councillor Shanks.
Yeah, sorry, just a matter of process here. Obviously today I was sent a statement and asked by a fellow councillor to read something on his behalf. More than happy to help any elected member as they see fit. Now, are we now going to enter into a debate whether or not we feel that was an apology or not, and whether or not this will now be included as part of the minutes? Is that where this process is heading, or how does this operate? Is this like me moving a motion and I'm looking for a seconder and we're going to open up the floor to a debate about this?
Mr. Viney?
Yes, that would be correct. To have the motion put to acknowledge the apology that was written or has been provided by yourself on behalf of Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Mr. Viney. Yes, Councillor Shanks.
So given that's the process, like I said, the statement was sent to me today. I'm operating on the fly here a bit, but can I please move that this statement be included in the minutes? And I'd like to speak to that if I can.
Thank you. Would you like to speak at this particular point?
I would, yes. Look, members, like I said previously, I've been asked to read out a statement for a fellow elected member. This elected member, you have no clue on what's going on in their personal life. You have no clue on anything else on what's happening. What you do have is a statement that I've just delivered in, yes, typical Councillor Tooley style, that has apologised for something that he's been pulled up by on an ombudsman. I know no more, no less than the rest of you. Please keep in mind on how, I guess, immature in some cases the feud has become, in my humble opinion, over the last years that I've witnessed it on my short term. And please keep in mind who we have in the chamber tonight, and please keep in mind the work we're here to do. I've been asked to deliver the statement. It's up to you guys how we want to now deal with this statement. I would strongly recommend that the bigger people turn around and they say, yes, let's include this in the minutes and move forward. That's how we deal with something like this. If you want to go down the same track that you have all the way along, then so be it. But please just think to yourselves, what can you gain by operating the same way?
Thank you, Councillor Shanks. I'm going to call for a seconder before we take... I'm calling for a seconder. Seconded by Councillor Vallelonga. Yes, Councillor Hughes.
Thanks. I've been blindsided a bit on this, but I'll have to declare a conflict of interest because I believe the apology is one of the code of conduct complaints that was put against me. So I will be putting in a perceived conflict of interest, and I think it's probably prudent that I leave the room. It's just, Councillor Tooley never left the room, and that's probably why he's now got to make the apology. But I will fill out a perceived conflict of interest. As I believe, one of the matters relates to me, but I suppose does relate to the fact that it was up to Councillor Tooley to declare an interest at that time, which I had done, and I'd left the room when he spoke, so I didn't actually hear what he spoke on those matters. So. Sorry? No.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Now, I think you've all heard a very passionate councillor that's very dedicated to being a councillor in this town, in Councillor Shanks. Been seconded by Councillor Vallelonga. Councillors, is there anybody else that would like to make any comments at this particular point about the motion that is in hand? Councillor Koch?
Look, I'll be voting against this because in those 3 occasions, Councillor Tooley had witnessed Councillor Hughes and the Mayor actually leave the room, actually declared and leave the room. So he could see that there was obviously a perceived and a conflict of interest. They actually left the room. He decided not to, and he's put himself into this position. This isn't about feuding. This is about keeping people accountable for their bullying and harassment. That's what it really gets down to. You've got a statement here which I think is abusive, defamatory and untruthful. So that's what we've got from a councillor trying to justify his pretty ordinary behaviour by not declaring on those 3 occasions when the others did. It was obvious. And then to come back and try to wiggle around and trying to cover up his tracks and almost become the victim himself, wants to portray himself as the victim, I think that's pretty bad form. That really, really is bad form. And you wonder why people in the community say, stop all this infighting. Well, I'll tell you where the infighting is coming from. It's not from me. It's me wanting people to be accountable for their behaviour. I'm not abusive. I don't send abusive emails to people. I'm not screaming at people and banging the table. I'm not doing any of that. There's only one person doing that. And here we have again, it's played out again. He's the victim, I'm the victim. It's not. He's the one that bullies and harasses people and tries to weasel his way out of things. Well, I think this is really bad form and we should not be accepting this as an apology. For example, at an IES meeting a couple of years ago, he screamed and yelled and carried on at people, shouting. Eventually, I put in a code of conduct, and one of those was to do with his supposed apology from that night. He had 6 breaches of the code of conduct, and also his apology was deemed to be not appropriate. This is exactly the same again, exactly the same. You cannot allow somebody like this to be emboldened by weaseling out of his responsibilities to stop harassing and bullying people. So I won't be voting for this, and the community understands exactly where I stand on standing up against bullies. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Koch. And the one thing I picked up there is that if we want the public to get back and support us, we need to work together. Councillor Goldstone.
Yes, I'd actually like to move an amendment to that motion. And the amendment should read that the apology statement read by Councillor Shanks as prepared by Councillor Tooley be noted, full stop. And the reason I'm moving that is that the statement that Nathan read contained more than an apology. I don't think that full statement needs to be in the minutes, but we do need to recognise that Nathan read the apology out. So I'm happy, that's why I'm moving the amendment.
Councillor Little.
Yeah, I've seconded that, Councillor Goldstone. I think that's the appropriate way to go.
This is an amendment to the motion.
Yeah, I accept. I'd love to second that amendment because I was thinking, it needs to be noted because there is, I'm a bit like Councillor Shanks. I've been here 2.5 years now, and whether you like it or not, there is 2 factions. I can't give a stuff when anybody says there is, whether you like it or not. But I believe there's good points on both those factions. I get on well with most councillors, but I believe if we note this motion as what Councillor Goldstone says, it puts some of it to bed, and hopefully that we can then come back in and get things done for the town of Gawler. I am sick of sometimes sitting in this chamber and thinking, I walk out this door sometimes, before I get in the car, I want to put my head through the window because we aren't doing our job. But I think this motion that Councillor Goldstone's put up goes a long way to doing that. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Little. We're now speaking on the amendment. Is there any comments from councillors? Councillor Fraser.
I agree with this. I think this is the way to go.
Thank you. Okay, well, what I'd like to do now is to put that amendment, and you all can read the amendment which is up on the board there, moved by Councillor Goldstein, seconded by Councillor Little. All those in favour of that? All those against? It's carried unanimously. Thank you very much, and thank you, Councillor Shanks. Sorry, that becomes a motion, beg your pardon. So I'll put that then as the motion. All those in favour of the motion? All those against? It's carried unanimously. Thank you again, Councillor Shanks, and thank you for general comments that have been made. And hopefully now we move forward and as one team together. So now the next is no petitions and confirmation of minutes, and that we have now on the board there. Councillor Hughes coming back in. Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Now the confirmation of the minutes, and also we had the heritage. Oh no, that's a bit later on. Okay, so the minutes of the ordinary council meeting held on the 25th of May 21 can be confirmed as a true and correct record. Somebody so moved that way. Councillor Hughes, seconded by Councillor Goldstein. All those in favour? Against? It is carried. Thank you. Next, we have business arising. Was there any business at all arising? Sorry? Oh, sorry, we got another one there. That the minutes of the special meeting held on the 15th of June, which was last week, be confirmed as a true and correct record. You've all had those copies. Moved by Councillor Hughes, seconded by Councillor Fraser. All those in favour? Those against? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Now, is there any business at all arising from any of those minutes whatsoever that needs to be discussed? If not, we'll now move on to officers' reports. And you've heard before there talking about the squash courts, item 11.1, and we have Mr. Chris Parrish, our team leader of property and facilities, in the room here tonight as well. And councillors, the officers' recommendation is there in front of you. So over to the floor. Councillor Hughes.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I'd like to move the officers' report if possible. I think it's fairly noting, but it still seeks to have discussions with the two groups to hopefully get some co-occupancy. We heard tonight some really good options with the squash court to try and work in with using those spaces for squash and football and things like that. But I think this officer's recommendation will hopefully allow continual dialogue and yeah, is basically a noting report, but also discussions. I know it takes two parties to have a discussion, so hopefully the football club will come along, and I think it's up to us and the community to try and work out and get a win-win for both the clubs if possible in the first instance. So I think this motion allows that, so I'm quite happy to recommend it.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. I call for a seconder. Councillor Di Fraser, do you wish to say anything?
Yes, I agree that this is just a noting report. I fully understand the position of the football club, but if we were to get rid of the squash courts, we'd never get them back. So once something's gone, it's gone for good. So I do think it is good to still be negotiating and see where this leads us.
Thank you. Councillor Koch.
Yeah, I'll be supporting this motion. I think it's important that we actually have true dialogue between the two clubs. I find it disappointing that the football club aren't coming to the meetings and listening to the solutions, because tonight we heard some very reasonable solutions, and the squash club, you know, we're facilitating some of those things that would make, you know, that would allow coexistence of that space. I'm concerned that that the court 3 has been taken over and carpeted. I hope it hasn't. The carpet hasn't been glued down. I'm also concerned about any alterations to the building, and I hope they can be rectified, because it may be outside the lease agreement. So yeah, a lot of noting, but it does keep everybody hopefully talking, and we do have the lease agreement up at the end of the year. So hopefully we'll be able to have two clubs coexist. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kosh. And a star footballer from years ago, Councillor Villalonga, you got something to say?
Yeah, just, look, I'll vote with this, but just to clarify something, Councillor Kosh, the person couldn't be here tonight because he's in the state. The rest, somebody would be here tonight, okay?
Thank you for putting it straight. Yeah, so yes, Councillor Little.
Yeah, I'll be voting against it because I think the whole thing's mute. I think there's the horse has bolted. They've had 4 or 5 years to facilitate being parts of that club. They've been contacted several times. It's never occurred. When I was the director of the Barossa and Gawler Football League, there was processes there where they tried to get them on board. They had 5 members at that time. All of a sudden, they decided to get more members because they're trying to build a profile, but they still get to the fact they haven't paid electricity, haven't paid membership fees. And to me, they've breached the lease. If you read the lease, which I did a couple of days ago, and because I've been privy to it, they haven't adhered to that lease since 2018. So I'll be voting against it.
Thank you, Councillor Little. Councillor Shanks.
For me, I'll probably share a similar sentiment as Councillor Little, but the way that the report sits and the recommendation, I need to look at it through the due diligence of an elected member position, not as a Gawler South fan. To be honest, not accusing Councillor Little of that at all. I just, I think we're coming in at the end of a conversation that has frustrated Gawler South Football Club, and I can understand their frustrations. Now, the due diligence that I, as an elected member, need to do is make sure that we get all the facts on the table to make an informed decision. At this point in time, I feel like I'm stuck in a little bit of a he said, she said. That, to me, doesn't allow me to put the nail in the coffin for a sporting community, albeit that I don't have too many ties with the Gawler Squash Club, but as an elected member, it is a community club. And there is a few items that, in my own voting capacity, I need to run to ground first. So I think, look, the way the report sits, like my colleagues have pointed out, it is mainly a noting report, and it does allow the dialogue to continue. If we see that dialogue come through with the facts and data that we can, quite happily and easily say, look, this isn't working, then I'd be happy to support the South Gawler Footy Club's position, and vice versa if the Gawler Squash Club are able to prove what they're saying. And as elected members know, we do have another report coming through that is seeking some funding opportunities for our Gawler Footy Clubs as well. So that's where I sit at the moment. And yeah, like I said, it's frustrating for me being brought in at the last end of the conversation, but yeah, look, let's run it to ground.
Thank you, Councillor Shanks. Now, moved by Councillor Hughes. Would you like to speak any more, Councillor Hughes, on this motion? Seconded by Councillor Fraser. We'll now like to put that motion. All those in favour of the motion? Those against? It is carried. Councillor Little has called for division. All those stand, please, that are in favour. Councillor Kosh, Councillor Goldstone, Councillor Hughes, Councillor Shanks and Councillor Fraser are for, and against is Councillor Little, I think, and I'm not sure what part of the toilet Councillor Villalonga it is, but he's disappeared, so the motion is carried. Thank you. Now we'll move on to item 11.2, Office of Recreation and Sport and Racing Infrastructure Projects. The names are getting longer. And we have Mr. David Barrett over there, who is the Manager of Business, Enterprise and Communications. So we have the motion, the officer's recommendation there, councillors. Have we got somebody to so move? Councillor Shanks, so move it. Do you wish to say anything, Councillor Shanks?
Yes, just that I'd like to move, so I have to choose from the 4 options there on number 2. I'd like option 2, where we see the change rooms delivered across our sporting precincts. Can I speak to that as well, Chair?
Councillor Shanks, yep.
Yep. Look, I think Aldo's summed it up perfectly. There's infrastructure that we own that we haven't had decent investment in for, I think, 40 years, Aldo pointed out. I think we have a strong sporting community that is well known, not only in our town, but throughout our region. I think the social benefits that we get from a strong sporting community that we have here in Gawler is tenfold. You know, from as Aldo touched on, the benefits that you get from the young kids coming off the streets, the benefits that you have with the trading network that I've been a part of for many years now, being able to work for, you know, fellow club members, or even just working on the facilities themselves on maintenance, and injecting that money back into the local economy is just, yeah, it's one of those things that we should cultivate. And item 2, I think for me, I like the idea of going for this sort of development that actually shares the love. You know, a lot of the grants that we go for and the targeted projects and everything, you know, you do get those sorts of situations where you go, well, why'd you spend $1 million on that when you didn't spend $1 million on this? You should have spent it here, not there. I think what this does is, yeah, like I said, it does share the love, and it starts bringing us online with some of the facilities that our local clubs use in neighbouring suburbs. So I think this is a good move, and yeah, happy to hear the debate.
Thank you, and seconded by Councillor Fraser. Do you wish to say anything?
I think every one of these 4 options is fantastic, but option 2 is spreads, as Councillor Shanks said. And it's not just the football clubs. We've got cricket, netball, and the growing females in football is fantastic. So for them to actually move forward, there's probably more people involved in these 3 clubs than all the other clubs put together. So I think it's a good option to go for option 2 and spread it around.
Thank you. Councillor Hughes.
Whether I can ask a question through the chair on whether we can actually have like a second one as a backup, because like Councillor, they all are good ones, but just a question through the chair about having a second one as well, or just the staff response on that.
Maybe Mr. Barrett, please.
So through the chair, we are entitled to submit more than one application to the program. However, they'll be assessed on various merit. The question is around capacity of staff to develop up 2 fully costed proposals within the next 4 weeks, which is extremely limited at this point in time. So that's why we're hoping for one option.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Any other questions relating to this matter, please? 11.2. If not, go to you, Councillor Shanks. Any final words? Okay, I'll put that motion. All those in favour of the motion? Those against? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. We'll now move on to local government annual general meeting, call for notices and motions, and we'll call on Ms. Kate Leeton, Governance Coordinator, to make a few comments.
This report is just to give members notice that the LGA has called for the business items for the October meeting. Staff are obviously also working towards developing some motions that we think might be worthwhile for consideration, along with any motions received from council members at the July meeting. So as you'll see, the renewable energy and the Telstra utility pits as described within the report, and of course they'll come back with more detail as they've been prepared. And we've obviously given reference to the previous climate change motion and where that currently stands with the LGA and how that's currently being progressed.
Thank you, Kate. And Councillor Hughes?
Yeah, I'm happy to move this officer's recommendation as is.
Thank you. And any comments at this particular stage on anything there? Or can I make mention too, the C that's got no line, what's that for?
It was just if there were any motions that members already had at the forefront of their mind that they wanted included.
Right.
That can be included obviously as option C, or they're welcome to present them over the course of the next few weeks for consideration at the July meeting.
Thank you. Second to that motion, please. Councillor Vallelonga. Do you wish to say anything, Councillor Vallelonga? Okay, I'll open it up to the floor. Has anybody got any comments at all to Ms Layton or anyone? Yes, Councillor Shanks.
Yeah, just quickly, I think this this process is a good one, and I think it is good moving motions like these, just to get, you know, our name, I guess, on the map a little bit, just to make sure that we're obviously engaging. I think both of the motions that we're going to put are sound, so I'm looking forward to seeing how they go on the floor.
Thank you. Any other councillors have any question to ask? If not, Councillor Hughes. Okay, I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Those against? Is carried unanimously. Thank you. We what? Whatever.
He wants to know whether he can bring forward an item, I think.
Oh, which item are you talking about bringing us forward? Right. Councillors, I'm in your hands. Yes, Councillor Fraser, second that motion. All those in favour of moving that forward? Okay, thank you. All against? For. And so we'll move on to that now at this particular point. Thank you. What are we going to? Kate putting it up. Okay, so now we've moved to item 16.6, and as you heard before from Paige concerning it. Now, Councillor Shanks, would you like to speak of this, please?
Firstly, thank you, Chamber, for accommodating that move forward. I think Paige is a young family that she'd love to get home to. Look, members, this motion is it's the start of good things. We have heard tonight from a very passionate ratepayer in Paige, and you know, I've been absolutely humbled to be reached out by Paige and just getting a little bit of background into her day-to-day life. There's a lot of things that I take for granted, having a 3.5-year-old at home myself, and what playgrounds I go to, and there's a lot of miseducation that I'm actually embarrassed to say that I am not as plugged into these sorts of things as I should be. What my motion is calling to do is provide a report back to the elected body about inclusive playgrounds, and hoping to touch on the items that Paige has actually itemised tonight, and pointing out that, you know, these things are happening, they're just not happening in our council. So I think there's a hole that needs to be filled for a slice of our community that needs this sort of assistance, and it's easy for us to give. Item 2 is install a PEC board. Now, I've learned a lot about a PECS board in the last couple of months, and you know, it's a picture exchange communication board that I've actually, as you saw in my correspondence, will cost us anywhere between $200 to $500 maximum per board. But what that does to change the ability for our current ratepayers to be able to bring their families to the facilities that their rates actually help fund is amazing. And you heard tonight with the different levels and domino effect that this actually has the opportunity in creating. I thank Councillor Hughes for asking those very great questions, because it's exactly that. the social inclusion that we can bring our community and education and just everything that comes with this very, very minimal cost on facilities that we already have that are fenced is, is tenfold. This, my warn members, is the beginning, but I think it is the right beginning. And I think we do need to, go on this journey a bit together and, and start looking into these things. And I think this is a sensible, dip of the toe, I guess, to be able to really provide inclusive playgrounds for our community.
Thank you, Councillor Shank. Councillor Fraser, you second the motion. Thank you, and like to speak. Thank you.
I think this is a really good idea. I just have a question about point 2. Can we actually say that we're going to install it, or does that have to come through as a budget bid in July for the budget? Because it really is an addition to the budget. So I'm wondering, can I ask Sam whether it needs to come back in as a budget bid, or can we actually include it in this motion like this?
Mr. Delina.
Well, certainly I'm not across the exact level of cost that would be required. I'd suggest that it should facilitate a motion under good governance per se. I could undertake to get some costs back to council ahead of the 6th of July and potentially consider a motion on notice at that time, without notice, sorry. If not, potentially motion on notice to actually be considered as part of the budget deliberations. I don't think that it would take too long to develop the costs. So we'd have to look at the number of fenced playgrounds we have, the actual cost of the supply, the cost of the installation, is it on existing fences, a standalone, those sorts of things. Probably engage with Ms. Carter, in regards to just her observations in that regard, and then provide some advice to elected members ahead of that 6th of July council meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Levin. Did that answer your questions, Councillor Fraser? Yeah. Elected members, is there any? Councillor Hughes?
I'm happy to support this motion. Also, I think in section 1, the report back, there is some really good university placement programs for occupational therapists, 3rd, 4th year students. They're actually looking for projects in communities, and it could actually be that they actually come and scope out the playgrounds and work up a program. They have a 10-week placements all around the state, all through South Australian country, UniSA, Flinders. They do these placements, and they're always looking for good projects. And this would be a fantastic project for them to work. And they do the community engagement. They work through a working group with staff and the community, and can actually help deliver a really good outcome. And the students are just about fully qualified, and they've got supervisors that will be supervising them that are fully qualified. But yeah, it's a really good chance to actually get some really good expertise and really up-to-date current knowledge and education in the area. I think the installation of the PEX boards would straight away put Gawler on the map for playgrounds in the state. And it's not a big cost, and it's going to make a very big change to a lot of people's, actually all the kids that use the playground, all of their interactions are going to change. So it's going to really make a big change to Gawler and put it on the map as disability aware, but also working with all of our community, and just the communication benefits for kids that will be able to learn and play together that would never be able to communicate is really special and really important, and it's just really good. And what I've been told is the allied health professionals wouldn't be able to do this in their sessions with but they can do it and get so much more benefit from the playground than in individual sessions that cost hundreds of dollars an hour sort of thing, where on the playground the benefits are really, really noticeable and really good. So yeah, I think installing the PEX board, really good. And the report back, and yeah, with maybe looking at whether we can marry up with some of the universities with the placement programs would be really good, and would be really handy. But just putting those PEX boards in place straight away will put Gawler on the map, and we'll have people coming from all around the state to use our playgrounds because they are so inclusive, and it'd be really, really good to do.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. You'll notice that Kate has adjusted number 2. It's Councillor Shanks and Councillor Fraser in favour of that adjustment, probably to keep things moving a lot quicker. And I can see Sam nodding over here, so that's good. We haven't got through the treasury yet, though. But and I think it's great to hear those passionate words coming from you. And it was interesting something Paige said before, and I'm not sure Mr. Delena would probably tell us, but we really don't have many that are fenced. I know there's one up Redbanks Road, but there's only 4 fenced, is there? Yeah. So, I mean, now with the renovations to the new one up Gawler East, and I mean, is that planned to be fenced? Well, it's in open area. Yeah, Mr. Delena, please.
Yeah, I suppose we have to seek some feedback in regards to this kind of fencing, because there's fully fenced, there's partially fenced in that regard, in terms of the nature of the installation PEX being, is it purely on fully fenced playgrounds? In answer to your question, Hemmerford doesn't have a fence, and it's actually set back quite away from the actual roadway itself, and that's the reason why.
Well, I think, as I noticed, that Paige emphasised the fact that it is far better to have a fenced playground area, that the children can't be just roaming out to the traffic or whatever. So is there any other questions? Councillor Vollonga.
Fully support what Nathan is doing here. I think it's magnificent. Growing up with a neighbour who's got spinal bifida for the last 20 years and umpteen friends that got autistic kids, I think this is the way to go.
Thank you. That'd be a great playground down at the LCI Centre, down the bottom of the street there. Okay, is there any other councillors? Yes, yes. Oh, the finance manager. Yes, thank you, Mr. Horwood.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, just I guess a slight clarification that number 2 suggests a 2021-22 budget bid, just to clarify this for 21-22 financial year. I just think that'd be appropriate.
Thank you, Mr. Horwood. Councillor Shanks, would you like to put that motion, please, or make any other comments?
If I can. Firstly, thank you, members, for your comments. I think there was, a good discussion had, and it's good to hear that I think Sam and his team are probably going to reach out to Paige and really clarify. And I think that goes to the point that there is in education, there's uneducated people in this space, and I'm one of them. And I think we should take the advantage to, again, educate ourselves, and in the meantime, really put minimal cost into a maximum impact project. And that's what this is. I'm happy to change for matter of process for the budget bit. For me, it's frustrating because I really feel like $1,000 will just get this across the line. But I'm happy to play ball for the outcome. So, yeah, look, let's show United Front, support this, and move forward, and let's get things happening.
Thank you, Councillor Shanks. I'd like to put that motion. All those in favour of the motion? Against? It is carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Thank you again, Paige, for your time. And it's interesting, I attended during the week, it was called in the hall just down here, it had a perfect sound system, I must add. David has fixed up the sound to work, and it was great. Councillor Shanks actually was the MC, and the only thing he couldn't do was play the didgeridoo. So I hope, Councillor Shanks, you get to play that next event. But to see these disabled children and the paintings and the art that they did, I had lumps in my throat all the time I was there. So for people like Paige and for people like Carly Hennessy and that are doing this great work, this particular one's through Theros Care. I think they were a sponsor to the event, but it was great. And so it's great to see that sort of thing happening in our town. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. Yeah, if possible, I'd like to move this officer's recommendation, but only actually option number item 1, noting the actual update report. I think Joe, the costings are just too prohibitive. If people speak into the microphones and use the microphones correctly, we don't need to actually spend 60, 80, 120,000 or we could be spending quite a lot of money on this process where we've heard just with the previous motion, just $1,000, $2,000 is going to make a huge difference to our ratepayers' lives, where we want to spend $60,000 on some amplified noise, where I think if we're disciplined and speak into microphones, we can do that without needing to spend any more money. So I'm just proposing that we just note this report.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Goldstone? Councillor Goldstone is second to that motion. Is there any other to speak on that? Or Mr. Barrett, would you like to make any comment at this point of the motion that's just been changed there?
So through the chair, I'm quite happy with the change to the motion. It takes a bit of a load of work off in the next couple of months. And as Councillor Hughes has suggested, using microphones appropriately actually gives good audio quality within the space. Not ideal. Obviously, with a significant acoustic treatment, we could get it more ideal. However, that is, I believe, as well, cost prohibitive.
Thank you very much, Mr. Barrett. Councillor Koch?
Yeah, I'm a bit confused here. So we've got the two issues around what we do in this chamber, the cameras and stuff, which I don't agree with. I think we just use these, that's fine. But we did talk about the acoustic treatment in the rest of the building. Just the first question, was all that just to do with speaking? What about music and performances? Does that do you still have the reverberance? Is it to do with that as well? And should we still keep that bit in there just to inquire about improving the acoustics in the rest of the room, especially if we want to have that space for performances, which is what we planned it to be?
So through the chair, the acoustics doesn't change. It is exactly the same for live performance, music, etc., as well as spoken voice. However, with other music, it's less noticeable, the reverberation, so it is a bit cleaner. However, it's still the same reverberation parameters that were in the report, but understanding that we'd have a few hurdles regarding treatment because it is all state heritage listed as well. We'd have to go through that whole planning process, and the acoustic treatment to the walls. If we're balking at 60 odd thousand for live streaming updates, we're probably looking that plus maybe double to do the acoustic treatments, and may not preserve the heritage character of the building either. So it's rather complicated in that space.
Councillor Koch?
Yes, Nick, after getting that response, I'm happy to support this motion, because I think if we just speak into these microphones, I think we're fine. I don't think we need to have cameras zooming in on us. It's just cost prohibitive. And the cost of doing the acoustic treatment, again, I think would be cost prohibitive. And the fact it's a heritage building and would lose some of the heritage fabric, I think, of the building. So I'm happy just to note this report.
Thank you, Councillor Koch. I'm sure that's been taken on board, because I've been hammering Mr. Barrett for ages at different functions I've attended down the end there. But when Councillor Shanks took over the microphone the other day, I thought it was somebody that I didn't know. It sounded so clear. So bit by bit modifications are happening. If only he'd learned to play the didgeridoo, it would have been okay. So yes, thank you, Councillor Hughes. Would you like to close the debate? Councillor Shanks.
Yeah, look, I'm probably going to speak against this, only because the officer's recommendation actually is talking about requesting pricing to come back on some. I understand that the advice has been sought, but I do fear that there's a solution here somewhere that doesn't see us moving up to the $70,000 mark and solving all the world's problems, but it does see us moving on a couple of options in the short term to improve our optics. Yes, I do lean into the microphone and I do speak as clear as I can. Thank you, Brian, for noticing. But, you know, I do get reports back from people that are listening in, and it's not always the case. I'm guilty of it as well. We move away from the microphone every now and then. And what this whole system is for community engagement in my mind. It's community communication. As you've heard me point out before, the COVID-19 crisis, the silver lining was it put us on the map on the YouTube feed. More and more people tune into that than you'd realise. And as you know, councillors, I was absent, late minute apologies for the last 2 meetings due to work commitments. I listened back to all those meetings and I sat and I heard how the debate went, and in all honesty, it was 50-50. So if we have an opportunity to build on an asset that we're already benefiting from, I say we should be. I agree that I don't think it's a $70,000 spend, given from where we're coming from, which is it's only the Zoom interface right now. There is solutions that other councils have engaged. City of Playford has been one. I've talked to some of the councillors there and they informed me that they got their solution for about $30,000. Now, it's not perfect. I'm seeing a shaking of head, so I might have been misinformed. But either way, there is some more information that I'd like to, again, run to ground before I put this to bed. And yeah, I think I put a budget bid in where I talked to a marketing company that said, you know, you could have some temporary equipment set up. We could set it up and it would cost you 20, 25 grand and you would be able to be portable. I do note in the report, it does point out that temporary setup is a frustrating thing, but yeah, look, I still am not happy with putting this to bed just yet, so I'm going to vote against, just noting the report.
Thank you, Councillor Shanks. Any other speakers for or against, please? Councillor Hughes, you're closing the debate. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's been mentioned and it's in the report that the size of this room, the dimensions, it really does make for the next step up is going to cost a lot of money. And I think as long as people are disciplined and the chairs note, if people aren't speaking to the microphone, I think that really makes a huge difference. And yeah, I'm just concerned that we could spend 70,000 and still only get a slight improvement is my concern. So yeah, I'd like councillors please to just note this report.
Thank you. I'll put that motion. All those in favour of the motion? Those against? It is carried. Thank you. Councillor Shanks has called a division. With all those in favour? Councillor Kosh is in favour. Councillor Goldstein, Councillor Little, Councillor Hughes and Councillor Fraser are for, and Councillor Shanks is against. The motion is carried. Thank you. We'll now move on to a very important part of South Australia at the moment, and with the budget announced today, I didn't see too much money given to Gawler, but I'm afraid we mightn't have asked them nice enough, but over now to the monthly finance report, item number 11.5, and the author is Erin McCarthy, a financial accountant working under Mr. Horwood. So the officer's recommendation is there. We have somebody to move that. Councillor Fraser, would you like to say something, Councillor Fraser? Straightforward. Seconder, please. Councillor Little. And open to the floor. The man's over here if you wish to ask him any questions. Councillor Kosh.
You've got a question. It's just about vehicle contributions. As I go through it, there's a lot of vehicle contributions. Could I just get a breakdown of those contributions and how much of that is private use? For example, I noticed in the budget, we get around $100,000 contributed, but then we send about $100,000 off to the Australian Tax Office as fringe benefit tax. So it seems like there's, we take in the contribution, then we give that contribution as fringe benefit tax. But I can't see, when I look at the budget, anywhere to cover off the cost of, the fuel, the maintenance, the depreciation, all those sort of things in the system. So could we just get a breakdown of the private use of the vehicles? I can understand it when it's part of someone's salary package, but I'm getting the impression that there might be some other things, people, we're being generous basically with the vehicles. I don't know, is that what's happening?
Thank you, Mr. Horwood.
Yeah, through you, Deputy Mayor. Look, I'd most probably need to take that on notice, but just in short, yes, the vehicle contributions from staff are intended to cover the private use component of the vehicles and the FBT, noting that there is a business use component attached to each vehicle, but I can provide sort of further details in the subsequent response.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Horwood. Councillor Kosh, you have another question? You still got your thing
Yeah,
on.
I've got a couple of others. The Local Government Association risk services is down by, and the rebate's down by 10,000. Is that just to do with a timing issue? Is that going to come into the next financial year?
Mr. Horwood.
Through you, Deputy Mayor. No, that's not a timing issue, Councillor Kosh. The amount of the rebate we get is heavily informed by the actual performance of the LGA and its schemes. So it's a one-off rebate we get that can fluctuate from year to year based on the performance of the scheme.
Okay. And the last one is the tree removal fees. Are we doing private private jobs now? Is that what it is, or how does that work?
Through the chair, no, we're not doing private work. I believe that's for the infringement or expiation notices that we apply for illegal removal, but Sam can provide context.
Yep, close. So that's in relation to section 221 applications that we get for some tree removals per se, where it's effectively cancel, remove the tree in a 2-for-1. If it's and it's assessed against the tree removal on council land policy in respect to the staff delegations to make that decision. So effectively a driveway for a new development and potentially say a new estate wants to remove a young tree. The cost is to remove that tree and to replace it with 2 new trees and maintain it for 2 years. So there's a general cost. There's some information on our website if you'd like to look it up in regards to how the costs are broken up in that regard. Thanks.
And all those evergreen trees that came over from South Africa, peppercorn, always greens, they're all gone now. Councillor Kosh and Councillor Hughes, I know you call them weeds, but they're the only thing that grow up at my property. But is there any other questions to do with the monthly finance report moved by Councillor Fraser, seconded by Councillor Little? Councillor Fraser? Okay, I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Those against? It is carried. Thank you. Carried unanimously. Now we'll move on to item 11.6. And again, over to Mr. David Barrett, Manager of Business Enterprise and Communications. And somebody to move the motion. Councillor Hughes, wish to say anything at this point, Dr. Councillor Hughes? Second to that motion. Councillor Goldstone. you wish to say anything? Very straightforward. Any comments, Mr. Barrett? Councillor Kosh?
You're just looking at this, well, I mean, you're comparing councils basically, but will you be comparing growth to established councils? Is that an issue? That's in this item, isn't it?
Yeah, who are you talking to, sorry?
Whoever.
Yeah, so through the chair, the comparison, this is the complication that we've got at the moment with the comparison because it's based on the Grants Commission data that's submitted. So it's very open to interpretation from whoever fills out the surveys, essentially, that goes back to the Grants Commission about that. However, we'll be able to, we understand in the portals, identify those other growth councils and look at what they are compared to us. It's the basis of the data comparative that is the problem that we've got at the moment that we're still trying to work through. So yes, we'll be able to refine and look at other growth as well, as long as we can all agree to what each measurement actually is.
Yeah, you're just looking at, I thought it was quite unfair that we've got a lot of capital expense because we're a growth council. And when you've got established councils, then they haven't got a lot of the expenses we've got. They can just keep on building up whatever. So yeah, as long as we can get that balance, I think that'd be good. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kosh. Any other comments at this point in time? Right, moved by Councillor Hughes. Any comments, Councillor Hughes? Right, all those in favour? Those against? It is carried unanimously. Thank you. 11.7, Planning and Design Code Update. The author is Jessica Leewood, Development Assessment Planner. Now we have the officer's recommendation moved by Councillor Goldstone, seconded by Councillor Hughes. Councillor Goldstone.
Yeah, happy to move the recommendation as listed. It's been less than 12 months since we actually went through a detailed process to appoint these members. So it makes sense to extend their term for another 12 months. The panel's been operating really well. All the new members are contributing. So yeah, happy with the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Goldstone. Any other comments? Councillor Fraser.
I have a question. I know it's only been in action for 3 months at the moment, but one of the things that the government pushed was that the new reform would result in a more efficient process with a faster turnaround. Is that the case? Is that actually happening?
Who do I see? Mr. Barrett? Oh, no, he's sitting right next to me. Yes, thank you. All these buttons.
Yeah, look, I think it still is very much early days, and I think both the development sector and the planning professionals are still getting used to the system. But I do believe that it will achieve some efficiencies and increase timeframes for approvals. I think the system, one of the key things from the system is a lot more accountable, a lot more transparent, so that it does put greater pressure and emphasis on the assessment pathways as well as the applicant as well. There are, puts back pressure on everyone in the system to provide information in a timely manner and for that information to be assessed in a timely manner.
Thank you, Mr. Viney. Councillor Kosh.
Yeah, thank you. Just looking at the traffic lights there's a lot of reds. For example, sloping land overlay, natural vegetation overlay, bushfire hazards, key rail crossings, urban transport routes, allotment frontage to depth and local heritage places and conservation of native vegetation. Now, council made comments about all those and they weren't accepted by the Commission. There's comments in there that it doesn't really matter, that we're okay, but can you just reassure me that we are okay with all those elements? Because some of those I'm really concerned about.
Yeah, look, Look, obviously, when you do transition from one planning system to another planning system and go from 68 council development plans to one statewide code, there's going to be a significant sort of change in policy from one system to the other. But my observations of the transition to date and the information and the comments that we've provided, that I would suggest that 90% of the comments that we did provide did make their way into the new planning system for Gawler, and that our transition from the development plan to the new planning code as it relates to Gawler has been a smooth one, and it is very much a like-for-like transition. So I'm very confident that the types of development outcomes that were previously being achieved will be achieved also moving forward. I think that this is iteration 1 of the code. As we progress, I suspect that will be iterations 2, 3, 4. And I think some of the things that we've identified will be sort of rectified in later editions. I just think that some of the things that we were proposing are good ideas, but such as the native edge boundaries and stuff, but a wider consultation process would have been needed, and given the short timeframes to implement the code, that wasn't simply possible in the first round.
Councillor Kosh.
Yeah, just to follow up, so the comments the council officers made, they won't be lost. So you I suppose you're keeping an eye on those, and then if there's an issue that we brought through in the next, the subsequent iterations. Yep.
Yeah, that is correct. And we are having ongoing conversations with the department about how the system is working, what are the teething problems, and we'll be continuing to reiterate these and either through the commission as part of ministerial development plan amendments, we'll be sort of figuring these in. And we're also going to be considering what council amendments that we may progress and pursue with the minister in our own right as well.
Thank you. Is there any, Councillor Shanks?
Yeah, I, like Kelvin, was involved in the process of selecting the current panel, and they still have my confidence from that selection point. We are I guess the whole state is the guinea pig of this new process. On the report, I'd just like to point out, I find the dashboard really great that you've included here, and just picking up on the $42 million worth of development that's going to come into the town is also great to see, not only from a building point of view, but also from a ratepayer local economy point of view. I think these sorts of dashboard images are quite good, and it was sort of good to see these tied to this report. The way the report sits, I'm happy to support it, and with like any new system, I guess we will sort of see those new versions come through, and it's going to be, the onus is going to be on council, I guess, to really be able to communicate the bugs as they occur. So I'm happy to support this.
Thank you. Is there any other councillors that wish to make any comment at this point in time? Just maybe to Mr. Riney, one of the comments, well, it's not only one, but I've had 2 or 3 people say to me, and I think it's quite noticeable, it may well be because people are asking for higher tin fences. Quite a number of houses around Gawler now, it's like Fort Knox, you can't see the houses. Has there been some conditions there about the height of the fences that people can have around their houses? I know we get 60,000 cars a day around Gawler, so it may well be because of noise or whatever.
Look, no specific change in policy that would sort of generate an increase in that type of structure or that type of development. Obviously, that's sought for a number of reasons. One might be privacy or noise attenuation. They're the common factors for people increasing fencing, but no policy change that would have driven that.
No worries. Thank you for that. And Councillor Goldstein, would you like to close this debate? Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against, it's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Now we'll move on to item 11.8, and it's from Ms. Layton, Governance Coordinator, to do with the delegation of quarterly updates, and the officer's recommendation is there. Have we got somebody so move? Yes, Councillor Hughes, seconded by Councillor Little. Councillor Hughes, would you like to say or ask any questions to Ms. Layton on that?
Thank you. No, I just think it's fairly straightforward powers and delegations that allow the council to function. So I'm happy to move the motion.
Okay, thank you. No other questions? I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Those against? It is carried unanimously. Thank you. Now we'll move on to item, no, we're out of that now, aren't we? So recommendations from committee. So the audit committee is the first one. Have we any recommendations from the special audit committee held on the 1st of June 2021? Sorry. Yeah. So, yeah, 12.1 under delegated authority for noting, and the officer's recommendation that council notes the adopted motion from the audit committee made under delegated authority in the meeting held on the 1st of June 2021. So we have somebody to so move that, please. Moved by Councillor Koch, seconded by Councillor Hughes. Is there any comments to be made? I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Those against? It is carried unanimously. The next one is item 12.11, WHS risk internal audit management structure. The recommendation that council adopts a recommendation from the audit committee made at item 5.1 of the meeting on the committee held on the 1st of June 2021, being that the audit committee notes WHS risk internal audit management structure report. 2, that the option 2 has presented of this report and implemented as council's management structure for WHS risk internal management, and that further report be tabled to the audit committee at the completion of the 12-month trial. So we have somebody so move that, please. Moved by Councillor Fraser, seconded by Councillor Hughes. Any discussion needed? If not, I'll put that. All those in favour? Those against? It is carried. Thank you. Now, the recommendations from the Gawler Youth Advisory Committee meeting that was held on the 7th of June. The item 7.1, Youth Development Officer Update. We have the recommendation there. Councillor Shanks. Are you so move? Seconded by Councillor Little. Any comments to make, Councillor Shank, regarding that? There was a little bit, but that's all been fixed up. Okay. No other comments regarding those matters? I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Those against? It is carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 12.2.2, motion bike month. This is the Councillor Koch and Councillor Hughes, this one's for. The recommendation is there before you, and that's to do from the Gawler Youth Advisory Committee. Now, move to Councillor Koch. Sorry? Item 8, the recommendation. Yeah, I'm asking for somebody to move the recommendation. Councillor Shanks has moved the recommendation and seconded by Councillor Hughes. Yes, Councillor Koch.
I just want to know, it talks about verbal reports. We give that a lot at the YAC. Do they ever get converted into a written report?
So,
all verbal reports be received. Do they actually? Should we actually have them as written reports?
Erin, would you like to answer that thing? Yeah.
Certainly. So through the chair, previously we were providing a verbal report through the Youth officer, and we're now doing that as a written report, which is the first recommendation. I actually wasn't at this meeting, but I understand that's probably an update from the young people, so that wouldn't come through as any kind of report because it is on the night, but we are providing a written report in terms of the youth officer now. So potentially next time we wouldn't put point 1 in because obviously you can't really note that, so we won't do that again. Yeah, we were doing that for a while. Then we stopped putting it through a recommendation, but we have gone back to a written report just to provide a bit more information.
Okay, any other questions at all regarding that? Moved by Councillor Shanks and seconded by Councillor Hughes. All those in favour? Oh, sorry, you wish to speak, Councillor.
Yeah, just in closing, to receive all the verbal reports, you can go back on YouTube and view them if you do need to. A lot of the verbal reports that go around the table are really great to listen to for a start, because it does really show what the YAC members are doing out in their community. So it is great to hear them, and us acknowledging them is very important. So I'm happy to support it how it sits, and just taking on board that there is a bit of a process change on the officers' reports that you'll see come through. But yeah, like I said, the youth advisory, you can always go back and watch.
Thank you. There being no other, I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Those against? It is carried unanimously. Thank you. Now we move on to item 12.23, motion 2021 Talking SA project. The recommendation is there in front of us, again to do with the Youth Advisory Committee. Moved by Councillor Shanks, seconded by Councillor Hughes. Councillor Shanks, you'd like to speak on it? Pretty straightforward. Any other councillors wish to make any comments at this stage or ask any question? I'd like to put that motion. All those in favour? Those against? It is carried unanimously. Recommendations from the Infrastructure and Environmental Services Committee meeting held on the 8th of June 2021. And the motions made under delegated authority of noting. And the first one is the officer's recommendation that is before you now to do with local design scheme, Aspire, estate age and so forth. So can we have, yes, Councillor Shanks?
Just a question, the way that this is formatted, if I move this, are we saying that 12.3 is item 7.1, 7.3, 7.4, that we're collectively doing all them together? Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Because if we are, yeah, I'm happy to do that.
Okay.
This is just noting the decision that was made from IES. So it's already a decision they've made under delegation and it's just presented to council for noting.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And given the format, I'm happy to note that, but just to be clear that I'm doing all those items.
Okay, everybody understands that. We need a seconder, please, and Councillor Goldstone. Anybody else that has any questions or comments? You wish to close off, Councillor Shanks? I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Those against? It is carried unanimously. Thank you. Now, the 12.31 and the duplicating street naming, and there's a fair bit of debate about that particular one. And I think it's also very important that time is taken with the naming of the streets and that around our beautiful town that's growing so rapidly. Yes, Councillor Fraser has so moved it, seconded by Councillor Goldstone. Councillor Fraser, you wish to say any more? I can see it now, Fraser Court. Yeah. Oh no, that's already there. I haven't seen Hallwood Avenue, you know. Dilemma's hard to spell. Yeah, Councillor Fraser? You're happy to move as is? Is there any other comments at all? If not, moved by Councillor Fraser, seconded by Councillor Goldstone. All those in favour? Those against? It's carried unanimously. Thank you for that. Recommendations from the Gawler Heritage Collection Committee. And I'll be in that soon. I'm getting old. But is there any comments there at all? 12.4 Yes, moved by councillor Kosh, seconded by councillor Little. And is there any comments? Councillor Kosh, do you wish to make any more comments on it? Any other questions at all? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? It is carried. Thank you, councillors. Now, external body reports. The Elderly Centre Advisory Working Group meeting held on the 4th of June. And the officer's recommendation that the council notes the minutes of the Elderly Service Centre Advisory Working Group. And it's just fantastic what the Elderly Centre and what staff are doing over there, especially through this time now where a lot of elderly people just don't want to go out because they're concerned about health and that. But I've attended a couple of functions and there's no doubt about it, there's some dedication there. So we'd like somebody to so move that recommendation. Councillor Fraser, seconded by Councillor Little. All those in favour? Those against? It is carried. Thank you. Right, now, where are we to now? Now, the Reconciliation Plan Working Group meeting, that was held on the notes on the 4th of June. And is there a councillor member here that's a member of that working group? Yeah, Councillor Little, that's right. Yeah. Have you got any comments to make, Councillor Little? So move the motion and seconded by Councillor Hughes. And I'm just wondering whether there's any report on how the activities went for Reconciliation Week. Thank you, Erin.
Sure. So through the chair, this year we did a lot of obviously partnering with groups that we normally do. There hasn't been a big event in Apex Park as normal. So we had a smaller event at the Sport and Community Centre that was based around children and particularly young children and getting them involved in reconciliation. And there are also some events happening for NAIDOC Week, as well as some basket weaving and some events in the library. So a little bit more low key this year, just as a result of COVID and trying some different things. So that's been quite successful so far.
That's great. Yep. Thank you for the input of staff into Reconciliation Week. So that has been now moved by Councillor Little and seconded by Councillor Hughes. All those in favour of that working group meeting? Thank you. Now, Climate Emergency Action Plan meeting notes. The Climate Action Committee notes, which were held on the 9th of June. So somebody to so move that. Councillor Shanks has moved it. Councillor Kosh has seconded it. Councillor Shanks, you wish to say anything? Okay, I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Those against? It is carried. Thank you. Now, important part of the evening, questions on notice. Has anybody got any questions on notice, please? Wow, what's happened? Everybody gone home. If there'd be no questions on notice, questions without notice. Now's your time. Come on. Is there any questions without notice? Is there any motions on notice? And we have motions on notice, but they have been withdrawn, I believe. Councillor Shanks? No, Councillor Davies has removed his. He's
Item 16.1 as the Australia Day. I think.
Is that what Councillor Shanks, you wish to speak on item 16.1?
Yeah, I'm deferring. Yeah, I'm moving to defer all of Councillor Tooley's motions on notice, if that's easier than going through every single one. Oh, yeah, let's say after his leave, yeah.
Sorry, I'm not with it there.
So I'm just deferring Councillor Tooley's motions until he's in attendance. Yep, that's perfect wording.
You second that? Moved by Councillor Shanks and seconded by Councillor Fraser. Wish to talk more on it, Councillor
I mean, just only that it's the right thing to do. I know that councillors have done it for me in the last couple of months, knowing that I've got motions there. They know I would like to be present to be able to present them. So I appreciate it when it's done for me. So I'm merely returning the favour.
Okay, open to the floor. Elected members, comments, please. No comments? If so, we'll put that motion. Councillor Shanks, do you wish to finalise it? Okay, all those in favour? All those against? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Now, what do we do now? Well, maybe we have a 5-minute break and, sorry? Where's the item? Civic Centre.
6.4 has been withdrawn.
Well, Councillor Davies has removed that. Yep. Councillor Davies has removed the item that he had there. Okay, 16.5, Councillor Shanks. Edward Street footpath, please.
Thank you, Chair. This was one of the items that was deferred for me the previous months that I flagged just before. As you know, members, this motion is my second attempt at this. Since such time, I actually have a new story for you, which I'm glad that you're excited for. I've had a mum that lives in the area actually contact me in regards to walking with her 7-month-old child on the road in the Edward Street closest to Dawkins Avenue. She was walking on the road and unfortunately an L-plater came around the corner a little bit enthusiastic, I guess, and she actually needed to quickly jump up onto the curb and pull up the pram. Now, I know this is one of those experiences that is not an everyday thing, but you know, this is feeding into what I flagged earlier when I previously tried to move this motion. What I'm talking about doing is installing a footpath on an area that is going to have a footpath eventually anyway, and take advantage of the fact that due to infrastructure works that's happened by SA Water and the damage that's happened to our curbing in that area, we pair the repair project together with doing the much needed footpath in that area. You heard last time, members, where I told you stories of you know, school students coming from Xavier and using that road to get picked up, and they were walking through there. You heard of me tell you about the high traffic flows through that area because of the works that have been happening in Redbanks Road for the SA Water connection. We have a real opportunity here to not only get the items repaired that have been damaged by the contractors that have damaged them, but also provide a footpath to a street that doesn't have a footpath, that now I've flagged 2 items where there's been safety concerns of these ratepayers. And these aren't just safety concerns just for the sake of complaining. This is a 7-month-old that had to be dragged up onto the curb due to having to walk on the road because the substructure on the side of each road is not suitable for a pram. Now, I've walked this area and I see all the root exposure, the pit exposure, the difference in levels and everything. We need to do something there before something seriously happens. This is another near miss that I bring you, noting that the other one that I did bring originally was based on the high traffic, but still, again, I can't stress enough that this is works that we are going to do eventually. Elevating it, I heard last time the argument of opening the floodgates. You've also seen me try to allocate more budget to footpaths because they are a fundamental. They are where I don't think we're living up to expectations, and it's not staffing fault, it's resource and funding fault. And I think we have focused in recent times in our town centre, and we are moving out, And we have all seen some footpaths upgrades in areas surrounding. This particular one has slipped through the cracks, and I think we should elevate it and avoid anything that may happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shanks. Have we, that's the motion that you have heard, and we need a second to that motion, please. Councillor Little has seconded the motion. Open to the floor. Any comments, please, councillors? Councillor Kosh.
Oh, thank you. Look, unfortunately, I'll be voting against this, and probably for the same reasons I spoke about before. First of all, we've actually got a list of, priority list where we're doing footpaths, and when I look at Edward Street, it's actually down a bit, and that would have been because council staff would have made an assessment about a whole range of things, and we did hear from Mr. Delina those things like near traffic flows, new bus routes, etc., etc., etc. The argument last time was it was a busy road and school students went up there. I think that was really to do with the Red Banks development. And I actually went up there today to see how many students actually use Edwards. Very few actually use Edwards. They actually walk up Red Banks Road. A few get picked up in Dawkins Avenue, and most walk up Dawkins. I think I saw two people two students walk up Edwards. So if the police asked why somebody was sitting there stalking, it was me because of this item. I wasn't stalking, I was just for this item, just to have it clear in my mind actually how many students use that, that access road. I only saw two. When you actually look at the road, the footpaths, the northern side is very narrow. You can't really put a path there. There's trees. When you look on the southern side, it's really only a pathway up to Jane Street. Then after that, you've actually got, I think it's one or two premises that have actually built out on the curb. So they've actually extended their land out onto the actual curb. So you'd actually have to cut out, and someone would have to put retaining walls up to get a path on the northern side. There's also a big tree there, so you'd have to actually remove a tree. So that's, they're major things, really, really major things. From Dawkins to Jane, there is actually a path there. There's actually a path there. Potentially you could fix up the trip hazards. I assume that's what Councillor Shanks is talking about, the works that SA Water had done. Is that the thing? Yeah, well, maybe they should come back and fix up the trip hazards, I would have thought. It's not compliant. That's probably their job. So the issue is I don't think we should be elevating it above. I don't think it's a main road. I think every road has issues. I know Sunnydale, Sunnydale, for example, there's no paths up there and cars are zooming around. We're doing nothing there. Through Hamilton Estate, there's no footpaths. We all walk on the road, and the traffic actually slows down and is accommodating for the people that walk up there. So I think people become accommodating to the neighbourhood. And that's what really happens. It's obviously unfortunate that an L-plater came around and they're too fast, but I don't think that's indicative of how people actually behave in that neighbourhood, because they know there's no paths and they would expect, potentially to see people walking on the side of the road, which is what happens up in my area, because there are no footpaths up there, and the drivers, their behaviours fit the neighbourhood. So they're the reasons why I won't be supporting this. So I don't think it's a busy road. It's not really used by students. There are two houses that have actually built out onto the footpath. So there's major engineering works there, and there's a really big tree that you'd have to take out. So it's not just a simple rolling it out. It's major engineering to get it right through, even if you can get it right through. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kosh, but after Councillor Shanks told me about it, I went up there and stood in the middle of the roundabout up there where Xavier College gets out. And if you want an experience, go and stand in the middle of the roundabout and see when the kids get out of it, school and come down that road. It is scary to watch. No, I know, but the hard part about it is, I know Mr. Delina's got stacks of footpaths to do and everything, the whole lot, but when somebody comes to an elected member like they have to Councillor Shanks, I think we've got to look at the point and see if there's some way that we can maybe make that a bit safer. I mean, you go through the Adelaide Hills and because idiots ride motorbikes like me and that sort of thing, they've put so many rails around it up there, you think you're on a racetrack. And that's because people were killing themselves on their motorbikes. Well, we don't want our pedestrians and people with prams to get written off because a couple of idiots have come down the road. So I think we've got to take every little thing into consideration when it comes to the safety, because Gawler now is accustomed to over 100,000 people a day. And, you know, that's quite a scary thing when you think about this little town called Gawler, the best town in the country. Thank you. Councillor Fraser.
Unfortunately, Councillor Shanks, I'm going to vote against this as well. Mostly because to do Edward Street, somebody else is going to get pushed down the list. And people have been waiting a long time to have their footpaths done. And I agree that Edward Street is not really that busy a street. You should, you know, there's a lot of other places, as Councillor Koch said, Sunnydale Avenue is really bad, but so is Phillip Street with all its bends. There's no footpaths. And if you're walking there in the morning or in the afternoon, you've got the sun in your eyes as well. And with the bends, you can't see anything coming, you know. So, and yeah, I just think and that's only 2 streets. There's lots of streets in Gawler, and neither of those are up the top either. They're down further in the list as well. So, no, I think we should stick to the list. It's there. It's been put there for a reason, and we should just follow it.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes.
Yeah, I'm sort of in 2 minds on this. I've got the photo that Councillor Shanks sent through on the 9th of March, which shows the street sign of Jane Street and Edward's smashed, and it doesn't look like just one car's cut this corner. It looks like 10 cars or more have consistently cut this corner. And so, when we do put footpaths in, we often put those safety barriers and things like that. That's what this photo sort of suggests to me is needed, is a proper crossover with for safety of pedestrians. And yeah, it just looks like someone's consistently cut this corner. And yeah, the road sign is flat on the ground, but yeah, it doesn't look like the only car that's gone through there. But and have in the past voted for adding more money to the footpaths and our footpath budgets. I think that's really important that we actually put more footpaths in. It means that people in our community can get around safer, and tries to encourage people to use the footpaths rather than walk on the road as well, which is safe. I would even, if we got a report back to put some crossovers and some safety things, but yeah, I think advancing it by 18 months, I think it's, from memory, it was 3 to 5 years. I can't, yeah. Oh, yeah. So I do think we need to highlight some of these roads, footpaths, and try and put some extra budget into it. Because yeah, if we've got a 30-year waiting list, it's not good for anyone in our town. And what have we got? 11,700 ratepayer properties or something like that. And yeah, we really need to look after our footpaths. So I suppose on second thoughts, I will vote for this because I think it's more promoting the fact that our footpaths are way behind and we need to do more. And also I'm concerned with the safety with that photograph. So yeah, I'll be supporting it.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. A question, Mr. De Lima. We quite often get told when elected members or somebody asks about doing something with the roads around our town that, sorry, it's Dip Ty's responsibility. And quite often this comes up. In a case like this, like Councillor Shanks talking about, and with the safety hazard of the children coming from school and all that sort of thing and these things happening, those barriers that we're referring to, if Dip Ty are the ones that are in charge of that road. Could we ask Diptide to replace barriers on some areas around our town?
Yeah. With respect to arterial roads, there is a shared responsibility in respect to pedestrian crossings places. In some instances, they'll fund the works in totality. Some instances, council do. We've got a budget bid, for instance, this year on Redbanks Road to put a pedestrian crossing across Redbanks Road that aligns with our cycling and walking plan, and that's pretty much council prioritising that exercise for that infrastructure for the community. So DIT do have programs where they will implement pedestrian safety improvements, but it's off their own prioritisation per se. So we can engage with them in that regard. I know that has been conversations for a number of years, and the local member has been involved with respect to improved arrangements for Xavier and pedestrian crossings in that regard, and there are some movements currently happening in the background.
Thank you, Mr. Lima. Is there any other comments regarding this matter, please, to do with the Edward Street footpath? Councillor Shanks, do you wish to close the debate? Councillor Hughes.
Yeah, thank you, members, for your comments. I guess I just want to really highlight the efficiencies that get picked up on infrastructure that's been damaged during construction and the ability to be able to pair in with the fix-up that's needing to be done and infrastructure that's going to be delivered eventually anyway. I also want to point out the footpath policy did not take into account the high traffic volumes that happened due to a major infrastructure upgrade in Redbanks Road that has caused this damage that will cost someone to fix. I also want to point out that it's where that fix stops and starts and the ability to be able to marry in now, it will finish off that area quite well. There's also very good examples of trees staying in a footpath and then bitumising around the tree base. For take behind Mitre 10, for example, there were street trees there, and I'm sure Sam will correct me if I'm wrong here, but there were street trees there that were left in place and they bitumised a section in order not to disrupt the routes. Am I correct? I'm seeing nodding. So there are easy ways around these sorts of situations, and the real aspect here on safety is the students that walk this street. Firstly, I mean this with all my heart. I actually really appreciate you going out there, Councillor Caution, and investigating for yourself. It is good to see that you did dedicate that time for my motion. I do appreciate that. However, the people that have raised this are the people that live on that street. They see the traffic every day, and I'm sure they do notice slow days on students walking through that that would reflect yours. But I also have reports of a lot of students walking through there. And look, if it's photos that we need, I don't know how appropriate that will be of him sitting out front taking photos of school students as they walk past. But the news story of a 7-month-old in a pram is another crossing this box that isn't in the assessment that was done. And it also should be noted that this policy is, I think, around 9 years old, Sam, the footpath policy, 7 to 9 years old. Oh, it was recently updated with the assessment.
So we brought the policy back to council recently. I think it was 2020. It might have been updated.
Yes.
So in that
okay,
regard.
sorry, my apologies. But there's a lot of mitigating factors here that have come about because of the large infrastructure works that I believe is a good enough reason to elevate this. And as I moved it in the first instance, I did an 18-month, and that was a purpose strategy, because what that does is it actually forces it to be stretched over 2 financial budgets. And for what we pay for the installation of footpaths and giving 2 years to be able to make this happen, I think we can justify making this happen when there's an opportunity, a real opportunity, to marry into some rectification work that needs to happen in the area already. And the byproduct of that is we address some safety concerns that are real from the people that live in this street, Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now put that motion. All those in favour of the motion? All those against? It is carried. Thank you. Right, now we move on to motions without notice. Is there any motions to without notice, please? If not, I'll call a 5-minute break and we'll come back and finish tonight with our confidential items. Thank you. Thank you, Brandon. Sorry, Dan. Right, thank you, councillors. Now we'll move into our last item of general business, and that is the confidential report. Thank you. And very straightforward, as you can see, a lot of work's been done, and I just said to an ex-business lady and Councillor Fraser, wow, there's so many different documents to what we used to have when we were in business, but you've got to dot the I's and cross the T's. So it's got to be done. So most importantly now, we need to know whether we need to go into confidence for this matter, please. So Councillor Shanks, that we move into confidence, seconded by Councillor Kosh. All those in favour? Those against? It's carried, thank you. Right, now we're now in confidence, and somebody can, the official security officer will shut the door and switch the light.